This story is told in actually all four Gospels in some manner or other. And oftentimes the story is used as a means of kind of saying, well, if nothing else, flipping tables is always an option. Chris, you want to forward? Many of you may have seen this image or the next one. I know these have been on Facebook. Many of my classmates and I, we get a little stressed with exams, papers, paperwork. We always resort to this and say, flipping tables is always an option. Okay, thanks. And we laugh as we comment and talk about this story, flipping tables. Flipping tables, which Jesus did do. The unfortunate thing is, throughout history, people have turned to this text and actually used it as a way to justify their anger. Some have read this particular story and read that Jesus not only made a whip, but used that whip and whipped people and animals in a fit of righteous anger. And if you go back through history, from the Crusades and earlier up to the present day, you'll see how people have used this text as a way to justify their violence against others, whether it's people who are not Christian or when people believe that their Christianity is being threatened. What was happening in this story is people followed a very particular, very rigid system in order to worship. And when Jesus came to the temple to worship, he realized that that system was wrong. He got angry, and he got angry because people were not getting it. People were not understanding, they were not believing that Jesus came into this world for us. Jesus came into this world as our way to God. People did not need to travel far and wide. What Jesus is saying is that people did not need to pay money for these sacrificial animals. They didn't need to pay a temple tax. People needed to believe that Jesus is God's Son and that Jesus is on earth for us. So let me ask, what do we do? What do we need to do to be part of God's community? Do we need to attend classes, meet with an ordained pastor? Do we need to read literature and find out everything possible about that church? What about when we want to be baptized, or a family member wants to be baptized? Or taking communion. Does a person need to be a certain age in order to take communion? Why do so many congregations, basically, for lack of a better word, have these rules in place? Why does a congregation have a constitution that says a person maintains church membership in XYZ church by attending corporate worship such as this, at least once a year, and communion at least once a year? Are these policies in place for the good of the people so that people know what they're getting into? Is it an easy way for a pastor to allot time, gather as many people as possible, using time wisely? Or is this our way of implementing a process that actually allows us to determine whether or not we think people are worthy to be part of God's community, a part of this community, a part of our community? Are these rules helpful? Are they hurtful? To people, to the community, to us, or even to the Christian church? How often do we hear of church decline, membership decline? We hear of church attendance declining, whether it's on Sunday morning, Saturday night. By setting up these procedures and these policies, are we kind of shooting ourselves in the foot? Now, I know Zion has been in this location for decades. And this location, like every other part of Madison, has gone through extreme changes. I don't know if Zion has been like a neighborhood community. If it was, we know it's not now. All we need to do is look around and we see people from Stoughton, from Cottage Grove, from Watertown. We see people also from this immediate community. Churches have systems and processes in place. It's an organization, just like every organization in society. Think through what a person does to fulfill basic needs, such as getting food or shelter. And what does a person do to become employed? What did you do to have the job that you have now? One of the very first things, government ID is needed. What does a homeless woman do when she's lost her identification because she left an abusive household? She has no money to get a replacement. Or the homeless person who spent the night in the shelter, just getting one night of reprieve from this cold and had everything stolen. How oftentimes do you go to a food pantry and government identification is also needed? Are these procedures in place so that the system isn't cheated? So that people don't abuse the system? In a similar way, think of the process that's in place for us to get the food we eat. Last week, Pastor Pat talked about abundance and scarcity, and how our abundance has led to the degradation of the planet. And that got me thinking about this luxury that we have. We have a luxury to eat fresh fruit all year long. It's 20 degrees outside. There are no fresh raspberries down the street. But consider what it takes in order for us to get those fresh raspberries. Are people paid a living wage for harvesting that food? Is the food transported across the country, polluting our air, consuming more fossil fuel, and degrading our planet, before the food even gets to our local store? Now, it may sound like with everything I've just kind of talked about, it may sound like I am against policies, procedures, processes, and believe me, that's not the case. When I go in for employment, I like to know what various policies are. And many of you have heard me complain, begrudge this process that I'm in for ordained ministry. But I am thankful for it, because I have a group of people walking alongside me on this journey to become a minister and a leader in the church. I have people that are walking with me, checking in with me, seeing how things are going, checking in, ensuring that I am doing this because I am truly called by God. Not because I want like a nice little white church somewhere out in the country. I'm thankful that this system is in place because as humans, I think sometimes we need to be accountable for what we do. Kind of a check-in as to whose interests we actually have in mind. For example, why do we want that brand new Lexus? Is it because it's truly the best comfortable ride? Or that new big house? Here's confession time for me. Scott already knows this is coming. When Scott and I got married about 6 years ago, I told him, we're going to buy a new house. He had a house, I had a condo. I said, there's no way we can move everything into this house. Not everything is going to fit. The underlying reason was because I resented the fact that he had bought the house when we were dating and didn't ask me about it. Kind of wondered, where is this relationship bigger house, more living space, so we could fit 2 households into one, so that we could have people over, and a house that I had input on. Well, after we got married, the housing market tanked, so that took care of that. Houses and homes in God's house, and all the rules that are imposed for the sake of community. No running in the worship space. No food or drink in the worship space. No talking before worship. People serve communion after they've been trained. You sit and you stand at particular times, and only people from this community receive communion. And I am so happy that Zion has few, if any, of these rules. But I think many of you, if not all of you, have experienced such things when you've gone to churches. Jesus came to the temple to worship. Jesus did not come to the temple to flip tables. But when he saw how people had skewed that purpose of worship, people were paying more fees for changing money for the temple tax, when people with little or no money were forced to purchase their sacrificial animals, he knew it was wrong, because people are basically forcing others to prove their worthiness by making them pay, just so that they could worship. We are called to reevaluate our religious acts and practices. We're called to reevaluate how people get their basic needs met. How do people get food and shelter? We are called to reevaluate the processes in place which impact this earth that we live on, this earth that we are leaving for our children and our children's children. We're called to think about how our religious tradition creates barriers between people and God. In just a little bit, we will share in a gift from God. A gift that God has given us. We will participate in a very simple activity. We will break bread and share from the cup. An absolutely awesome gift that we don't have to pay anything for. A gift that we receive each and every week, no matter how often we mess up and no matter how badly we mess up. This gift comes to us with no questions asked. Amen.